I survived 100 days in Minecraft 2. I fought all new monsters, used all new weapons, and explored all new dungeons. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Minecraft 2? There's no such thing. But what if I told you there was? What if I told you that Mojang has secretly been working on it behind the scenes for years? This is the story of how I flew all the way across the world to Sweden and stole the super secret copy of Minecraft 2. Now, just before we get into the video, I'm so excited to announce something that I've been working on for a really long time. Does your gaming room feel a little boring? No setup can ever feel complete without personalization. Make it unique to you with your very own Mineface. Get premium quality canvas art of your own Minecraft skin shipped directly to your door. Go to minefaces.com, click create now, and enter any Minecraft username. Now, just scroll down and attach the file. Once you've placed your order, our team will create an exact canvas-sized render of your Minecraft face to ensure the highest quality, pixel-perfect print. We have over 100 distributors printing locally in 34 countries. We'll select the closest one to you to ensure fast and easy shipping. Minefaces.com also has games that you can play. I've been playing Krillo on my phone, but I always end up failing right around 200 points. I'm super excited to see how high you guys can score. Order your Mineface now to get $20 off during the grand opening sale. Use code Krillo at checkout to get an extra $10 off. And now, on to the video. It was day one, and I was so excited to get things started. I realized we spawned right next to a village. This was great because we could get some early game resources, but I was also really excited to see some of the new villagers. I came across a villager that had a crossbow, and I realized that they had added villager guardians. After making my first crafting table, I kept on exploring. I found some leather armor, and I grabbed a bunch of wheat. Then I came across a chest with 7 iron ingots. It was perfect because I knew exactly what we were about to do. First things first was an iron pickaxe, but right after that, it was time to make one of the all-new weapons. We made our first spear. Now let's pause for a second. I need to explain some of these new awesome combat changes. The new combat system is insane. It adds tons of different weapons that we're gonna take a look at right now. The dagger is really quick. You can get some pretty cool combos, but if there's more than one enemy, it kind of falls apart. The spear is one of my favorites. It's really good for keeping enemies at a distance, and if you pair it with a shield, it works really well. Now the greatsword. It's two-handed, it hits hard, and it's good for dealing with about 3 enemies, but if you find yourself with more than that, then the next option is the longsword. This thing is a beast. It is slow, but it is the best at crowd control. It also introduces skills and perks. Every mob we kill will have a small chance of dropping a skill book. These will unlock a new perk or a new skill that we can immediately assign and start using. Look at this, it's so fun. Okay, the interruption's over, let's get back into it. Day 1 was now coming to an end, and the last thing I did was gather the rest of the hay bales in the village. But while I was doing that, I noticed something. Just to the east of the village, I saw a building. I had no idea what it was, but I thought it'd be a perfect place to explore on day 2. And just like that, the sun set on our first day. I found a little house to sleep in, and I spent the night thinking about all of the amazing times we were about to have. All the new biomes, all the new animals, all the new dungeons that we were about to see. I was excited for it all. And just like that, we had survived our first day. It was the morning of day 2. I woke up and took in the surroundings. Today was the day that we were going to find out what that building was. I walked into one of the houses and I saw a baby villager who looked like he was trying to annoy his mom, and it looked like it was working. I spent the afternoon gathering supplies, but after that I wanted to test out this new spear. After I gained enough confidence in my new fighting abilities, I decided now would be a good time to try and take on this building. I knew I needed to be cautious. We weren't very strong yet, and if there were bad enough enemies in here, it would be a really rough time. I made my way inside and I was careful as I could be. Once I entered the halls, I got an advancement. It turns out this place was called a monastery, and after looking around a bit more, it turns out that this place was one big village. I kept going and found a room with a bunch of bookcases and a ton of loot. I went through the hallway and found a staircase. This would lead me to an amazing place. The second floor was beautiful. It looked like some sort of temple. This was the place that eventually became our home base. I opened up a chest and found something that would later take us on an amazing journey. It was a map, and it said that it would lead us to some place called the Thorborne Towers. But those towers were going to have to wait until we were much stronger. I spent the rest of the day watching the sunset, and then I went to sleep. I spent the morning on day 3 getting myself a bit more situated. Today I wanted to do a bit of exploring, but before that I was going to need to make a little bit of space for my inventory. Once everything was organized, I went back through the halls towards the village. I checked the map to see what was around us, and I decided to go east. After passing the village, I ran into something great. It was a little raccoon, which is actually one of my favorite animals. This got me really excited for all the animals that we were about to see. And after looking at our quests, I realized we had already unlocked the animal dictionary. This would give us tons of information about the animals that we would come across. I checked the entry for raccoons, and it said that if they get into our house, they can actually steal food from our barrels. After I was done reading, I kept moving east, and I came across another village. But before I went and explored it, I sheared a bunch of sheep and killed a bunch of cows. The sun was setting as I was making my way into the village, but when I got there, I came across this stone structure. I had no idea what it was, but it would be perfect to explore on day 4. After stealing almost everything in the village, I went to sleep. It was day 4 and time to figure out what that structure was. My inventory at this point was very full, so my next priority was to make a backpack. I made my way towards the structure and I broke in. I went down the ladder and found out something hilarious. It was actually another village, except the entire thing was underground. After exploring a little longer, I found enough string so we could make our first backpack. This thing was huge, but it looked pretty cool. And that was pretty much it for day 4. Now, day 5 started with more of the same. I wanted to make sure that I got everything that this place had. Once I was sure I got everything, I went up the ladder and started making my way home. I spent the rest of the day organizing all my new stuff. I decided that on day 6, we were going to go on another journey, but this time we were going to go much further. I started the morning with smelting some of our new ores. I only had enough iron to make some leggings and boots. I looked ridiculous without a chest piece, but I did have this farmer's belt that gave us at least a little bit of protection, but I still wasn't feeling too confident. The last thing I did was make a sleeping bag, and this would allow us to sleep anywhere. And just like that, I had everything I needed for another journey. I jumped down into the pond that was behind our home, and I set off. I made my way south into the Canopy Forest. This place was a little dangerous because of how dark it could get under the trees. And after admiring some of the wildlife, I came across a Canopy village. I got jumped by a zombie, but I took care of him. And after I was done looting the village, I went to sleep. The first thing I did on day 7 was complete our set of iron armor. Even though I now had the full set, I still needed to be very careful because this is hardcore and enemies hit really hard. While looting the rest of the buildings, I came across a grindstone. I know now that this is one of the most overpowered items in the entire game. I continued south and up a mountain. I took in some of my surroundings before mining some of the exposed ore. I found a group of sheep with horns, and just behind them was a group of yaks. I tested out my sword skills and made my way further up the mountain. That's when I was ambushed. 2 massive flying monsters came out of nowhere. I could hear them right behind me, so I had no other choice but to jump down from the hill. I quickly tunneled into the mountain so I could get my bearings. These things were terrifying, but I knew I had to kill them. First things first, I needed to learn their attack patterns. I needed to know what these things were going to be able to do to me. That's when one of the monsters charged up and spat something at me. After I dodged the poison, it tried ramming me head first. My new goal was to get it trapped under the hill. That's when it did another dive bomb and I was able to hit it with my sword. And after a few good hits, the beast was dead. We did it! I couldn't believe it. We killed our first big monster. After taking some time to celebrate, I made my way back up the mountain to try and find the other one. I found him flying over the ocean, and luckily for me, he was too far away to attack me yet. So I made a spot for my sleeping bag and slept through the night. I woke up on day 8 and was immediately attacked by 2 more. While I was trying to dig myself a hole, I was hit by one of their poison blasts. I couldn't believe how fast it was draining my hearts. I needed to get back to the hidey hole quick, so I took a leap of faith and barely missed this lava pool. Look at how close we were to dying. I landed with 1 heart. That was almost game over, but somehow we made it back. I couldn't believe I survived that. After regenerating all my health, I came back out of the hidey hole and I was ready to take this thing on. My plan was to get it stuck in the cave again, but that's when the other birds showed up. I waited for one of them to get stuck under the cave and then I attacked. The first one was down and now there was just 1 more to deal with. I used the same strategy to get him stuck and then I unloaded on him with my sword. This whole fight really boosted my confidence. I now knew that if I came across one of those again, I could kill it, as long as I was smart. And I was right. As I continued up the mountain, I was attacked again. I dug myself another hole, but this time I couldn't get it stuck. I decided to find a better place to take things out, and that's when I saw a pirate ship. I made my way onto the sails and realized this thing was filled with pillagers. I was faring well up until they broke my shield. Without something to deflect the arrows, I'd be toast. While I was healing up, one of the birds attacked, and it got me all the way down to half a heart. I blocked myself in and waited for my regen. Once I was fully healed, I jumped out and killed the rest of the pillagers. I claimed their ship for my own, and while I was still getting attacked by the bird, I looted the rest of the ship. I put on some of the enchanted gear that we found, and I made myself another shield. I placed my sleeping bag down and went to sleep. Day 9 started with me exploring more of the ship. I had uncovered a Vindicator spawner, which was crazy because we could make an unlimited emerald generator out of it. I marked it on the map for later. Now it was time to leave. I jumped in the water while I was still being attacked by one of the birds. These things just don't leave you alone. Once I got to land, I was finally able to kill it with my spear. And this time it dropped something. It was called a Naga Fang, and I could use it to create a poison dagger. After a few eventful days, it was time to make my way home. While I was walking, I came across a house on the side of a mountain. On the inside of it, there was a sleeping villager. I thought I'd leave him alone for tonight, so I went upstairs and put my sleeping bag down and went to sleep. In the morning, I talked to the villager. He sold us what's called the Blue Journal. This was a guide for 2 of the new dimensions that were added to the game. The first was the Everbright dimension. It said it was always day and always cold. The second was Ever Dawn. It was always warm and had tons of poisonous insects. I continued walking and grabbing whatever I could along the way. And before I knew it, I was home. I was glad to be home. These first few days had been a little crazy. We fought some monsters, got some gear, and had some pretty close calls. But now it was time for a new quest. And for this one, we had to go deeper. In order to get to the new dimension, I was going to need a few items. All of these things were deep in the earth, so I knew I needed to start digging. I gathered everything that I would need and started on the mine. It turns out that I got lucky and broke into an underground railway system. And after making my way back up for more torches, I noticed this beautiful aurora over the sanctuary. I spent day 11 searching for resources in this underground mine. After a little while, I found our first diamonds of the series. This was great because in order to make the portal to the deep dark, we were going to need obsidian. That's when we made our first diamond pickaxe. The only other thing we were needing was called cold deep stone. And after spending most of day 12 in the mines gathering resources and fighting mobs, we had found it. It looked like some sort of bluish cobblestone. I actually really liked the block. I spent the rest of day 12 and even the beginning of day 13 continuing to mine. Once I was satisfied, I pillared up and I emerged near the village. I now had everything I would need for the portal. Once I got home, it was time for some upgrades. I first made an iron and then gold tier backpack. The amount of storage on this thing was insane. Next, I made the feeding upgrade. This would feed me with whatever food I had in my backpack without me having to do anything. Now that I had my food taken care of, I went to sleep. I started day 14 by setting up an enchanting area. I upgraded our spear to diamond and got some level 30 enchants. We got fire aspect 2, smite 4, and unbreaking 3. This thing was for sure gonna come in handy. The last thing I did was create the light and dark chest. When placed on bedrock and given a diamond, it would allow us to travel to the deep dark. I spent day 15 clearing out a location for the portal. At this point, I had no idea what was down there, but I knew that it was time to go. On the 16th day of our journey, I went through the portal to the deep dark. I spawned in some sort of safe room and I checked the quest book. I unlocked something called the Skulko Finder, and this would help us find mobs and caves. After doing some organization, I decided to start digging. And literally after 1 second of digging, I had found diamonds. After mining the ore, I realized that they actually dropped full diamond blocks. This was a pretty good sign, but I didn't let my guard down. I continued digging and using my Skulk Finder, and that's when I saw it. It had found some mobs, so I started digging towards them. That's when I broke into the first cave. After clearing out some space, I used the finder and realized they were way closer than I thought. So I grabbed my axe and got our first kill. I moved closer and one-shot the zombie. It turns out that our smite enchant worked. I then found even more diamonds. After gathering some more resources, I moved towards another cave. That's when I started getting chased by one of those four-legged creatures. I fought it one-on-one with my spear, but it managed to hit me once. Look how many hearts it took down. I needed to make sure that I never got hit twice. I continued searching for more caves and trying to use lava to my advantage. I got jumped by another one of those dog things, but this time I was able to kill it without getting hit. I used the finder and found a massive cave filled with enemies. That's when I saw the Warden. I was gonna need to kill one of those things in order to progress. While I was clearing out a bit more space, I got jump scared by something. I still have no idea what it was, but it gave me blindness. It happened again when I got close to the Warden, so I knew that I needed to switch up my strategy. I dug down until I got right in line with him. Once I knew I was safe, I started attacking. This guy had so much health, and I needed to use the Skulk Finder to make sure that I wasn't gonna get jumped from anyone else. And after literally hundreds of hits from my spear, he was dead. I quickly ran out and grabbed everything that he dropped, and then I blocked myself in. I thought that was the end of it, but then I realized I killed the wrong Warden variant. In order to get back out, I was gonna need to kill the open mouth Warden. So I broke out and continued searching. I killed a few more mobs before finally getting the attention of another Warden. I knew that if this guy hit me once, I'd be gone. So I used the same strategy as last time. It took forever, but finally he was dead. It turned out to be the correct variant, and the quest book gave me everything that we would need in order to get out of here. So I made my way back to the safe room, put down the chest, and left the deep dark. I spawned in near the village, and oh boy, I was happy to see the sun again. I closed out day 17 in our sleeping bag. In the morning, I made our way back to our base. We had found some great stuff in the deep dark, and now it was time to use it. I started by making a full set of diamond armor. This was necessary because the new Nether had some crazy mobs. Next, I enchanted our chest piece and our leggings. I didn't get the best enchants, but they would do for now. After sprucing up our enchantment area, I watched the sunset. Tomorrow would be our journey to the Nether. On day 19, I found a spot for us to put our Nether portal. I wanted it to be pretty big, so I cleared a ton of space and then placed down the obsidian. The portal was now finished, and although I had full diamond gear, I still wasn't feeling too confident. I had no idea what was in the new Nether. but I knew it was time, so I made my way into the portal. I came out the other end in some sort of forest. It was a biome I haven't seen before. I checked the map and made a marker for the portal. At least I knew that I'd always be able to find my way back. While I was admiring some of the new scenery, I found a new goblin. He had some insane trades, like 4 ancient debris for 5 netherite scrap. I wanted to keep him permanently, so I went back home and made some leads. I then pulled him through the portal, tied him to a fence so he would have those trades permanently. I went back in and killed a ghast that was hiding right beside our portal. Now it was time to do some exploring. Day 20 started with killing some sort of zombie torso thing. I saw some sort of city in the distance that I absolutely had to get to. So I started digging, building, and watching out for ghasts, and then I had made it. It was some sort of nether city, but it actually also had a fortress that spawned on top of it. I broke my way into one of the buildings and started looking around. These buildings were absolutely beautiful. I couldn't believe how great the blocks looked. I knew that I was going to want to build with these, so I started gathering as many as I could. I mean, just look at how amazing this looks. I continued gathering anything I thought would look cool, and then I made my way to our first blaze spawner. I had some pretty close calls while trying to kill as many as I could, but then one of the big brother blazes spawned. These things were crazy. They could close their shields and block all of our attacks. I would fight for as long as I could and then run away and try and regain my health. And after I was satisfied with how many I had killed, I kept moving. I was excited to see everything the new Nether had to offer. While I made my way through the fortress, I killed a wither skeleton, and it dropped exactly what I had been waiting for. I was finally able to roll. This is my favorite new skill, and it comes in handy so often. I continued exploring the Nether. I gathered anything I could along the way. I came across some sort of frozen ash biome. These new frost magma blocks looked really cool. I also gathered a bunch of regular magma blocks and almost burned to death a couple times. I kept making my way through the frozen ash, and I came across some sort of wither skeleton that shot wither smoke. He was still no match for the smite enchant on our spear. I thought now would be a good time to start making our way home. I made my way back to the fortress and gathered some nether wart. I came across this enchanted magma cream who actually put up a pretty good fight, and I ended the day gathering some decorative blocks. On day 22, I continued home. There were so many ghasts in the biome that I was crossing through. I spent almost the entire day bridging and watching out for ghasts, but finally, I made it home. I spent all of day 23 decorating the portal. I wanted to have a big entrance into the portal room. I decorated the outside with some of the new wood that we got from the Nether. On the inside, I used nether brick and nether rack. Then I decorated the inside with more wood. By day 24, the portal room was almost done. I thought it looked pretty cool. I loved these new pieces. At this point, I was ready to get back into the Nether. Once I was in, I decided to head north. I found some sort of overgrown biome and the sky turned blue. I also found some sort of weird fairy thing that looked pretty cute. That's when I was attacked by our first piglin. After moving up a bit further, I realized he came from some sort of piglin outpost. I needed to know what loot was in there. So I made my way down and came across some sort of jail cells. It looked like they were keeping pigs in there, which was a little creepy. Clearly these guys were evil and needed to be killed, so I started getting my way up to their base. I rushed into the first floor and took all the loot from the chest. When I made my way up to start fighting, I got attacked by a piglin brute. These guys kill you so fast, so I needed to make a huge clutch escape. But they followed me down and I just barely survived by barricading myself in. I opened up the barricade and started using my spear to kill all them. Once I was healed up, I ran out and faced them head on. As long as they didn't get the drop on me, I should be fine. I played it cautious by pillaring up and attacking them from afar. It was perfect. I was able to hit them and they couldn't hit me. Once I was confident they were all dead, I started looting. Although we didn't get anything too crazy, I felt good that we conquered the outpost. While continuing on day 25, I found our first bastion. I was confident that we could take it out as long as we were smart. I used netherrack barricades to deal with the piglins and got jumped by one of the berserkers and I barely made it out. Unfortunately, in the chests, there wasn't really anything good, but I was more confident on the other side of the bastion. I broke into the lower level and had some crazy fights with some piglins. There were enemies all over the place. I needed to be really careful. Once I felt confident enough, I jumped down to loot the main chests. I was almost completely overrun by these magma creams. They were so annoying. I mean, if after all this, it was going to be magma creams that would kill me, I should just quit Minecraft altogether. After After healing up, I was able to dispose of them a lot easier, and that gave me a chance to start getting the loot. I grabbed everything and got out of there as fast as I could. On day 26, I came across some sort of nether temple. I made my way inside and saw a chest. Now I had a hunch. I've been playing Minecraft long enough to know to check for TNT, and I was absolutely right. Unfortunately, everything in the chest was pretty much junk, so I continued on my journey. While being attacked by a ton of ghasts, I made my way up to some sort of nether hive. When I checked in the chest, it turned out that there was nothing in there either. Amazing. By day 27, I had made my way back to one of those beautiful end cities. I admired some of the architecture. This town square looked really cool. I checked out what was inside one of these houses, and I found some pretty cool new decorative blocks. Then out of nowhere, I was jump scared by some sort of massive mosquito thing. I checked my map and started bridging. I found some nether rubies, and it seems like they were about as good as diamond. I then made my way through this beautiful glowing biome towards another one of these temples. It had a 4-leaf clover in the chest. I still have no idea what that thing does. After continuing on, I came across another bastion. This one was a lot more out in the open, which was great because it'd be a lot easier to kill the piglins. I got overconfident and tried a one-on-one with a piglin brute. He took me down to 2 hearts. I needed to be a lot more careful. I had some more pretty crazy battles, and actually the fire aspect on my spear worked really well. It felt really stressful looting while you knew that piglins were right on your back. And honestly, at this point, I was done with the stress. It was time to go home. I spent day 29 perfecting our all-new storage system. I was able to link all of the barrels together and access it through one single inventory. I then placed down the grindstone. I had big plans for this thing. Now let's say I find an item that has an enchant on it that's really good. I can actually use the grindstone to copy those enchants and put it on whatever I want. This was my long-term plan for becoming completely overpowered. I spent the rest of the day admiring our new portal. On day 30, I went back into the deep dark to see if I could get some easy exposed diamonds. I then ran into, whatever this thing is. It actually ended up dropping an Eye of Ender. That's when I remembered why I don't spend that much time mining in this dimension. On day 31, I decided now was the time to set off. It was now time for the Thorborne Towers. I jumped down from my home and I set off on the journey. I thought now would be a perfect time to tame our first horse. After kicking me off a few times, we became best friends. Our new horse was going to make our journey a whole lot easier, so we set off together towards the towers. While moving through the forest, we came across a bear, and I didn't know it at the time, but you can actually tame these things. We arrived at a clearing and found some sort of little house. I thought it'd be the perfect place to spend the night. On day 32, I came across a village. It didn't have any good loot, but I did do some trading for some emeralds. We kept making our way northeast. At this point, we were so close. While making my way through the dense forest, I saw it. It was a massive structure made out of mushrooms. And while I was making my way closer, I realized those aren't the towers, those are the towers. Tomorrow, we'd begin our attack. Now, having 2 separate dungeons spawn next to each other was not something I had accounted for. I decided first I should take on the Mushroom Tower. After getting a better look, it seemed like there was a bunch of vanilla mobs, but all of them had armor and weapons. I made a little spot for my horse outside the dungeon, and I set off. Tons of mobs started pouring out from the darkness. Luckily, my spear put up a really good fight. They followed me down the hill in a single file line, which was exactly what I needed. There was tons of them, but at this point, my gear could take them. I killed the first group and looted their bodies. My goal throughout these dungeons was to get some enchanted weapons and armor pieces that I'd then be able to copy onto my more powerful gear. As I continued up the hill, I got attacked by tons of monsters with high-level gear. There were too many at this point, so I decided to retreat. I ran away behind the dungeon, and that's when I got a better look at the Thorborne Towers. I decided to get to the top of the Mushroom Tower and clear it out first. I pillared up to the top of the first level and started exploring. At this point, it was starting to get dark, and I really didn't want to go through this dungeon at night, so I decided to sleep. On day 34, I was back at it. There was a bunch of different levels to the tower. I could access each of them from the one below. When I made my way up the stairs, I ended up getting a huge jump scare. I mean, how did a bear get up here? Now, I love animals, but unfortunately, this guy was in my way. I felt so bad. Look at the look this cub gave me. I continued up the tower, killing every mob that I could. I realized that there was way too many mobs crowded around the ladder, so I decided to pillar up. Look at this view of the towers that I got. I pillared up to the next floor and started killing. They started doing a ton of damage to me, and I was forced to retreat. I had managed to put myself in a very tough spot, but I was able to use my bow to my advantage. I then cleared out the rest of the mobs. I only had one more floor to go. I saw that one of them dropped a pick, and it turns out that it had a sharpness 5 enchant on it. I then pillared up one final time. There were tons of mobs on this final level. I needed to be smart. I ended up aggroing the skeletons, and I made them start attacking each other. It was perfect. That's when I got the notification that there was going to be a blood moon tonight. That meant that I wasn't going to be able to sleep. I ended up using my bow to clear out the last of the skeletons. I needed to get somewhere safe. When looting the chests, I found some more armor for disenchanting. I made my way over the hill. I saw some sort of contraption, and I had to see what it was. It turns out there was a chest hanging from the dungeon. I used a water bucket to make my way down to it. There was a backpack and also some pretty good gear. I spent the rest of the night watching the towers. Tomorrow, we were going to take them on. I cleared out the last of the mobs while the sun was rising on day 35. I then practiced my water bucket skills to get down. I got attacked by some pillagers wearing armor, but at this point, there were no match for me. Now, it was time to take on the towers. I broke in and immediately was attacked by a spawner room. The mobs looked like skeletons wearing some sort of rose armor. I went in and immediately lit up the spawner. I was so glad that these things were skeletons because the smite enchant on my spear absolutely destroyed them. Even though I had powerful gear, I still needed to be really cautious. If they all swarmed me at once, I could die pretty easily. I continued up the tower, killing as many skeletons as I could and looting everything I could find. I had finally made it to the top of one of the towers. After continuing to explore, I found a staircase to the top of the watchtower. There were skeletons riding phantoms and they were swarming the entrance. I jumped out and I killed as many skeletons as I could. And after lighting up the spawner, I went to sleep. Day 36 started with the realization that lighting up the spawner pretty much didn't do anything. A ton of the riders spawned just as I was trying to break the spawner. I then looted the chest and used my bow to take out the rest of them. I had finally cleared one of the watchtowers. I made my way over to the next tower. I dug my way in, killed a bunch of mobs, and got to the top of the tower. After clearing out the spawner, I went back down and used a barricade to kill the rest of the skeletons. At this point, we had tons of amazing loot. I thought now would be a good time to start the journey home. It was now day 37 and it was time to go home. We were extremely high up at this point, so this water bucket would be very essential. I started making my way down. I thought at this point I'd be able to get some easy loot from exposed chests, but that's when this happened. Without my slow fall boots, that would have been series wrap. I needed to be way more careful. At this point, I was done with the towers, so I water bucketed my way to the ground. We had conquered the towers. We got tons of loot, and I couldn't wait to get home and see what we got. After spending all of day 38 traveling, we were finally home. It was time to do some seriously insane upgrades. From looting the tower, I found out we got 2 separate Protection 8 enchants. I used the grindstone to copy both of the enchants onto books. I then upgraded a chest piece to netherite, and there it was, a Protection 8 netherite chest piece. I put the other protection enchant on some fresh diamond leggings. We just made some crazy upgrades, but we weren't done yet. Remember that sharpness 5 pickaxe? It was time to disenchant. I then created our new sharpness 5 diamond katana. We just made this thing so overpowered. Look at how cool it is. It was now day 40 and time to test out some of the gear. I made my way into the Nether to try and find some easy enemies. I decided that this time I was gonna go south. I found my first enemy and killed him in just 2 hits. That's when I came across the magma wastes. There was a piglin spawner with some chests, but nothing really good. I wanted to see how a one-on-one fight with a piglin brute would go, and it turns out really well. I made my way through the frozen ash biome, and then I had my closest call yet. I was freaking out. I thought for sure that was the end of the series. I made my way back up and through the bastion. I found myself in one of those big open areas again where all of the loot was at the bottom. I broke through and started taking on the magma creams. Now that I had a sweeping weapon, it was a lot easier. I collected all the loot and then kept going. I came across some sort of lava biome and it was absolutely beautiful. I pillared over to a structure in the magma pool and found tons of loot. I made my way towards a structure I haven't seen before. There was tons of lava, so I needed blocks to get around. And surrounded by lava and on top of a spawner, we found some ancient debris. I made my way through this lava biome and eventually found a Nether temple. And inside the chest was our first dragon egg. When the egg hatched, we would get a dragon mount. That's when I started on the journey home. And on day 44, I made it to the portal. Now I've done a ton of combat at this point in the series, but we haven't done that much work in the house. That was about to change. I wanted to make an outdoor area for our dragons, so I planted a huge area of dirt that we could build some perches on. On day 47, I used my silk touch pick to gather some grass. I filled in the rest of the area with dirt, and then I placed some grass blocks around so it would grow. And voila, the outdoor platform was done. I then made the hatching area for our first dragon. I knew that when it was born, I was going to need to tame it, so I started to fish. I love fishing in Minecraft so much. It's so relaxing for some reason. I spent the rest of the day fishing. I woke up on day 49 to our all-new aether dragon. I chased after it and tamed it with a bunch of fish. I knew it would take a few days for it to become a full-fledged adult, so I spent the night watching to see just how much she would grow. I woke up on day 50 and realized I was really low on diamonds. I decided to spend the next few days mining. I found a goblin that was trading 2 gold ore for 3 gold ingots. On day 51, I broke into this massive cave system. Out of nowhere, there was a few husks that dropped down on me. But at this point, they didn't stand a chance. I wanted to figure out where they were coming from because there was just so many. So I pillared up and realized there was a spawner. In the chest, I found something called the Leviathan map. After finding tons of diamonds, I decided to make my way back up. When I got home, my aether dragon teleported to me. She had already gotten so big, but unfortunately, she wasn't big enough for us to put a saddle on her just yet. I decided that if I was gonna have to wait for her to grow, my house could use some upgrades using some all-new technology. In order to get things started, I was gonna need a water wheel. I needed to flatten some ingots using a mechanical press, and I decided a water wheel would be a great way to power it. Once I got the wheel rotating, I attached the press. It worked. When I threw an ingot under the press, it would crush it down. And after spending some time making it look nice, the machine was finally completed. In the morning of day 53, I had a one-on-one fight with an enderman. Out of nowhere, it started doing some karate. It looked hilarious for some reason. Now I should explain what these machines are for. The goal here was to create everything that I would need in order for us to make some rotating doors as an entrance to our base. I started clearing out a spot for the doors. At this point, I had no idea how the rotating system worked, but I did figure it out in the end. After covering the bearings in slime, I was able to use the wrench to determine how many blocks I wanted to rotate. At this point, I realized that for one of the parts, I was actually going to need brass. And brass is made by combining copper and zinc in a mixing machine. Now, in order to get the mixer hot enough, we were actually going to have to trap a blaze in something called a blaze burner. So on day 55, I went into the Nether to capture myself a blaze. All I really had to do was walk up and right-click, and then I had captured it. I noticed it was snowing as I was walking back from my portal. I guess winter had started. Once I was back home, I placed down the blaze burner below the mixer. I threw in my copper and zinc and started mixing. This thing looked so cool. Once I was done, I grabbed the brass and made everything that I was missing. It took me forever to figure out how to do this stuff, but it finally worked. It wasn't perfect yet, but I had finally built rotating doors in Minecraft. I mean, just look at this. It doesn't even look real. At this point, I realized that I had been working on this for way too many days. I was hungry for adventure, and it was time to go. My dragon was finally big enough that I could put a saddle on her. This meant that we didn't have to walk anywhere anymore, because now we could fly. I spent the morning on day 58 making a nature's compass. This would point us to a savanna biome, where we would hopefully find Barako, the sun god. I made sure to gather everything that I would need, and then I found my dragon. My goal was to follow the Leviathan map, so I saddled up my dragon and we took off together. I couldn't believe it. We could fly anywhere that we wanted. This was pure freedom. I was so excited about what we were gonna find. I mean, just look at how amazing this is. We can finally go anywhere we want. After a few minutes of flying, we had finally made it to the savanna biome. I spent a long time looking for Barako, but unfortunately I couldn't find him. So instead, I pulled out the Leviathan map and started getting closer. I ended up landing at a village, and that would be the perfect place to spend the night. I woke up on day 59 and took some time to get my bearings. I found some desert creatures that ended up looking pretty crazy. I then made my way towards the Leviathan. It turned out that it was some skeleton of some insane monster. I broke my way in and was immediately attacked by husks. I took them down with ease, and then I looted everything I could find. At this point, the only thing really good in here was the emeralds, so I made my way back to my dragon. And while flying, I came across a structure, and it turned out to have our first waystone inside. If we could find one more, we could place it down and then teleport between them. I continued searching through the savannah. Unfortunately, I didn't find him, but what I did find was another pirate ship. I slept through the night, and in the morning, I attacked. Taking down this ship made me think about just how far we've come. I thought about all the progress we'd made throughout the series and decided I wanted a bigger challenge. I came across what looked like a well, but instead of water, it was filled with lava. I used a water bucket to get down safely, and when I got down, I was immediately attacked by tons of mobs. I immediately ran away and blocked myself in a wall. I had no idea what these things were, but they could take a ton of damage. So many started gathering around the hole. It took me forever to clear them out. I figured out they were coming from a spawner, and I struggled hard, but I ended up breaking it. Although this place was very dangerous, there was tons of great loot. I took in the rest of my surroundings. This place looked absolutely insane. It looked so evil. I continued my journey through the halls, and there were enemies everywhere. Every time I broke a spawner, I got ambushed by tons of high-level enemies. I ended up spending so much time down here, I must have killed hundreds of enemies. I absolutely loved the way the katana worked. I ended up getting pretty good with it. That's when I came across something that looked a little suspicious. There was a massive pile of TNT attached to a lever, and I wanted to press it so badly. After spending some time thinking, I decided against it. I mean, when else are you gonna get this much TNT for free? Just for fun, I decided to set one off. As I did, I got the slow effect. It would have killed me if all of them went off. I spent some time looting, and I got tons and tons of items for disenchanting. Once I was satisfied, I decided to make my way back up to the surface. Once I was out, I went to sleep. I started day 62 by finding a massive pillager grain mill. There were tons of them outside, and they just kept on coming. I switched between long range and close range to deal with them. There were tons more pillagers on the inside of the tower. There were even witches that kept poisoning me. Once I had cleared the main floor, it was time to go down to the basement. Now, I absolutely hate witches in Minecraft, so this felt pretty good. I was searching around the basement, and I found a diamond in a hopper, but when I took it out, this happened. I don't think that was supposed to happen. I then got back on my dragon and set off into the night. In the morning, I noticed another waystone, and after collecting it, I decided to make my way home. It felt like a long time since we saw this place, and it actually felt really good to be home. After spending some time organizing my new stuff, I noticed how much my armor was in need of repair. I decided to make my way back into the Nether to find a Nether goblin so I could get some easy netherite trades. I absolutely love the new Nether. After spending some time just doing whatever, a goblin finally found me. I knew it was going to be quite the task getting one of these back to my base again, but honestly, it wasn't too bad. I just needed to remember to make a name tag this time. Now, I have no idea why I named him Frankie, but now that I'm looking at him again, it's a good name. I spent the rest of the day both repairing and upgrading my armor. For this next journey, we were gonna need it. I spent the morning of day 65 making the Eyes of Ender that we were gonna need to locate the stronghold. I put down a waystone. That way I could put another one at the stronghold when we find it, and we could easily go back and forth. And after hitting my head on the ceiling, it was time to start the journey to the stronghold. I threw our first Ender Eye, and I set off. I couldn't imagine having to go on foot. Having my dragon with me made this so much more fun. I spent the rest of the night in an abandoned house. I spent all of day 66 continuing my journey, and finally on day 67, I had found it. I noticed I broke into a storage room, so I looted everything I could. After walking around a bit, I realized that this was not any stronghold that I had seen before. I ended up finding this massive room with a water fountain in the middle. This room ended up being a hub with a bunch of hallways branching out. This stronghold was huge. I ended up walking for what felt like hours before I found anything. I came across a library that was filled with cobwebs. I made my way through a hole in the wall and found this massive patch of diamond ore. I got 19 diamonds in total just from this one patch. I realized the stronghold was connected to a huge underground mine. Back in the stronghold, I realized just how powerful I was to regular enemies. At this point, there was pretty much nothing they could do to me. I then came across this really cool room with tons of exposed ore. It looked like where the residents of the stronghold kept their valuables. I then found their jail. It looked like this is where they would keep all of their prisoners. Finally, after days of searching, we had found it, the end portal. I looked at how many Eyes of Ender we were gonna need, and it turned out to be a lot, so I placed down the waystone and went home. I was in dire need of Ender Pearls, and I realized I was gonna need to spend the next few days gathering any that I could. So I set off into the night in search of Endermen. Unfortunately, at this point, it was almost sunrise, so I wasn't even able to kill a single Enderman this night. My plan for the daytime was to go to the Nether and get some piglin trades, and at nighttime, we would hunt Endermen. Now, I had the bright idea of bringing my dragon into the Nether. This turned out to be a huge mistake. As soon as I went through the portal, I realized my dragon was taking suffocation damage, so I quickly got on and got it out into the open. At this point, I didn't have any meat on me that I could use to heal the dragon, so I wanted to get it out into the overworld. But it wasn't working. My first thought was it was too big, so I decided to build a bigger portal. But even though this time there was tons of room, I still couldn't get it out. I ended up going through the portal myself, and I came out in some random cave. And as soon as I went back through, my dragon started flying away from me. It ended up getting stuck in the ceiling, and at this point, I was scared that it was gonna suffocate. I pillared up to the dragon and tried attaching a lead, but it just wasn't working. And at this point, I was burning moonlight, so I needed to go out and start hunting Endermen. I then spent the entire night searching, and I still couldn't find any. I needed to come up with a new way to get pearls. I decided to go back to the stronghold. I remembered finding some pearls while I was there, but after spending an entire day searching, I still couldn't find any. It was time to try trading with some piglins. I collected all of my gold and set off to the Nether. After pillaring up to my dragon, she was finally listening to me again. So I flew through the Nether to the first bastion that we took on, and I started trading. Now, I traded for almost an entire day, but I got 0 ender pearls. I knew at this point that it was time for me to swallow my pride. I needed to wait for the night and then start hunting. On the night of day 72, I was actually able to find quite a few Endermen. I love fighting Endermen with this new combat system, but what I don't love is when you kill a bunch in a single night and you only get 1 Ender Pearl. I spent all day and all night of day 73 hunting, and on day 74, I was completely determined to get them. I continued my hunt. I killed all the mobs that I could find up until sunrise. It was now the morning of day 75. I went searching for any sort of structure that would have Ender Pearls in a chest. While making my way through a pond, I was almost eaten by a snapping turtle. That's when I came across the entrance to an underground dungeon. The inside of the dungeon was absolutely stuffed with zombies. I got so many kills just standing at the top of the stairs. When I was done on the inside, I was very happy to see that it was already nighttime. At this point, I only needed 2 more ender pearls. After spending the night fighting everything that I could see, I only needed 1 more. So I decided to start making my way back home. On my travels, I came across a gorilla, It made me want to make a zoo so bad, but that was probably gonna have to wait until the next 100 days. I grabbed a horse, which ended up making the journey home so much easier. Since we only had one more pearl to go, I decided I was gonna go down to the deep dark. This place still creeps me out, but at least this time I'd be a lot more powerful. I journeyed through the paths that I had made myself before. I mined my way towards a cave, and that's when I found it. One of the gross eye dog things. I was so happy that it dropped the ender eye. I had no idea how rare it was gonna be, and I got it first try. I now had everything that I would need for the journey to the end. I ran home as fast as I could. I was so excited to see all the new additions to the end dimension. Although I felt like I was ready, I didn't know if we were gonna be strong enough to fight all the new monsters in the end. But there was only one way to find out. I placed down all the ender eyes, and I watched the portal open. I made my way through the portal, and it was now time to fight the dragon. I looked at the Ender Island and realized I would need an Ender Pearl to make my way there. So I stared down an Enderman from afar and had our karate match. I was nervous about this pearl throw, but it ended up working out. It was time for the dragon fight. At this point, I had no idea, but they had buffed the health of the Ender Dragon by like 4 times. Now, I was a bit rusty. It had been some time since I fought the dragon, but I was confident with all my buffed up gear that I'd be able to kill it. Some of the end crystals were trapped in cages that I had to pillar my way up to, but all in all, the first stage of this fight went pretty well. Once I broke enough of the crystals, I opened fire. I wanted to see just how much damage my bow was gonna do. Once I got a few good hits in, the dragon decided to perch for the first time. After doing a ton of damage with my katana, the dragon flew me into the air. Looks like the feather falling enchant saved me once again. I got swarmed by endermen so many times, but it was completely fine. I loved fighting them. I ended up getting shot up in the air so many times, but again, those feather falling boots came in clutch. I spent some time killing endermen so I'd have some extra pearls to get around the islands. I was almost out of arrows at this point, so I needed to wait for it to perch and give it everything that I had. After getting jumped by a few more groups of endermen, it was time to finish the fight. After swinging for the fences with my katana, we had done it. We had finally killed the Ender Dragon. I collected the experience and we got all the way up to level 52. Now that we had killed the dragon, we could finally explore all of the new content that was added to the end. There were so many new places, so many new enemies, and so many bosses for us to conquer. I collected the dragon egg, killed some endermen, and went through the portal home. We were back. I checked our quest book to see what our next steps were gonna be. I then collected our rewards. I looked at all the new bosses. There was the End Golem, the End Guardian, the Shelterer, and the Void Worm. Once I was back home, it was time to prepare. I disenchanted a Mending, Efficiency 5, and Fortune 3 pick. Now that took quite a few levels, so I went off to kill some enemies in the night. It had been quite some time since I admired the sanctuary. I absolutely love how this place looks. It was now time to get back to the end. I was really excited to see what the End Islands had in store, so I built my way over and went through. After jumping down, I collected some new ore. I then gathered all the new items that I could see. Once I decided on a direction, I started building over using red leaves. When I arrived, I noticed just how beautiful all these new additions were. It made me so excited to see what else was going to be in this place. I continued on and I wanted to try fishing, but unfortunately, I just couldn't manage to catch anything. This place was absolutely beautiful. I just couldn't wait to see all the new biomes. It was just then I made an absolutely terrible mistake. I wanted to make my way to another island, so I threw an ender pearl and came way too short. When I hit, I immediately started falling, and luckily I had the void totem in my left hand. I had only been at the islands for a few minutes, and already I had wasted the totem. I was gonna need to be so much more careful. It was then that I came across our first new structure. It was a massive end tower. After making my way to the top, I realized it had another waystone. At this point, that was exactly what I needed. I noticed something in the distance. I decided to pearl over and check it out. It was some sort of obelisk, but I had no idea how to activate it. I decided to come back later and figure it out. While continuing the journey, I came across the entrance to what looked like an ender fortress. I was then attacked by an enemy that I'd never seen before. It was some rectangular object, but it really wasn't that difficult. I continued my journey through the fortress, but there really wasn't anything there. I continued making my way from one island to another. I saw a geothermal spring, so I went to investigate. There were poisonous blob things at the top that were dropping gelatin. For some reason on the next island over, I came across an incomplete nether portal. I got an achievement that says the portal was useless, so I just kept moving. The next biome was some dead forest with a couple of ores that I've never seen before. In the distance, I saw something bright and colorful, so I made my way towards it, and I realized that they were some of the most beautiful trees I've ever seen in Minecraft. I mean, just look at how amazing this biome looks. I had officially found my new favorite building blocks. On the start of day 81, while fighting an Enderman, I saw what looked like an end underground mine. It was completely filled with shulkers, and they are my least favorite enemies to fight in all of Minecraft. Now my inventory was getting really full, so I needed to make a pit stop at home. I checked on the progress of a new dragon that I hatched, but he still wasn't big enough yet. I spent some time upgrading my weapons, and then I went back in. Once that dragon was big enough for me to ride, it would make the end so much easier to get around. I made my way through a new forest biome, and I came across a new structure. I still can't get over how great all this new scenery looks. I mean, look at how cool these floating frogs are. While making my way towards the new structure, I noticed that it was actually beside an end city. Now, when I made my way in, I was immediately confused. While looking at an obsidian TNT block, I started getting attacked by flying shulkers. I then came across one of my new favorite blocks. It was a bouncing pad. While gathering some pads, I found some new ore. It was called corundum, and it was able to make a new armor set that was actually more powerful than netherite. I then gathered every single piece that I could find. After doing some research, I figured out I would need a void crystal, and that would be dropped by the shelterer. Now the good news is, it turns out this is the structure where we summon him, but to do that, we were gonna need a nether star. Now, since I didn't have one yet, I decided to take on the end city. Guarding the city, there were these end golems, which were actually really fun to fight. There were also these mimic slimes, and they would attack you back with whatever weapons you were using. Unfortunately, at the top of the end city, there really wasn't any good loot, so I decided to make my way home and gather what I would need to fight the Wither. When I came home through the Waystone, I realized this dragon was almost ready for us to ride. I grabbed my soul sand and my wither skulls and found a place for us to fight. Now I was really confident to fight the Wither. I knew we had tons of really good gear, including our smite enchant on our spear. He was barely able to do any damage to us, and after taking almost no time at all, the Wither was dead. With our new nether star, we now had everything we needed to fight the new boss. It was now time to jump back in. It took me a while to make my way back to the temple, but once I was there, I immediately started the fight. I had no idea what to expect, but I heard the only way to fight this thing is using TNT. I couldn't figure out what this thing was, but I didn't want to get too close to it. That's when I decided to light my first TNT. The first stage of this fight ended up being a complete joke. I ended up lighting so many blocks of TNT, and each of them did such little damage. I spent a few minutes just spamming all the TNT that I had. It took for absolute ever. Once the final TNT exploded, I noticed the barrier was down. I jumped in to start attacking, and then this happened. That thing got me down to 1 heart with 2 hits. I decided to stay back and use my bow and arrow to get some good shots. And after just a few seconds of fighting, we had killed the shelterer. It ended up dropping 4 void crystals, which was the exact amount we needed to make our new corundum armor. I decided now would be a good time to make this new armor, so I put down a waystone and went home. It was then that I got the best news ever. Our dragon at this point was big enough for us to fly. I took him through the waystone, and then we began flying around the end dimension. This was going to make it so much easier for us to get around the islands. Over the next few days, I found so many new cool biomes. This new level of freedom felt amazing. And after searching for long enough, I came across a new structure. Immediately when I landed, I started getting attacked by some mobs that I've never seen before. They came at me with these glowing pincers that looked super intimidating, but honestly, at this point, my gear could take just about anything. I then came across these purple blocks that looked really cool. I collected all that I could, and then I broke into the citadel. This place was full of traps, so I had to be really careful. After spending a lot of time walking through the halls, I found something that caught me completely off guard. It was our first end golem, and this thing looked really tough. If I was too close, it would smash the ground, and if I was too far away, it would throw these purple spikes at me. Luckily, this thing didn't have too much health. It only took a few sword swings, and this thing was finally dead. So far, we had killed 2 of the new bosses in the end. We only had 2 more to go. I kept exploring and fighting tons of enemies along the way. Once I was done clearing the courtyard, I noticed there was a hidden passage underneath. I made my way down and kept moving. There was tons of good loot in this underground maze, and I was able to collect most of it. When I entered the next room, I was surprised by another end golem. I was able to quickly dodge out of the way of his attacks and then getting close. And before too long, we had killed our second end golem. After continuing looting and making my way through the maze, I came across our third end golem. This time, I just ran in and took him out really quickly. After continuing through the maze, I came across some trapdoors, and once I opened them, I could tell that this room was going to have a powerful boss. I dropped down and started investigating. Once I got close enough, that's when the Ender Guardian spawned in. I needed to quickly learn his attacks and also how much damage he was going to do to me. When I got in close, he would charge up and push me really far back. Then he would pull me in with some sort of gravity gauntlet that I couldn't escape. I knew I needed to be careful because he was taking down my hearts fast. I tried using the item that the smaller end golems dropped, but it really didn't do too much damage. Once I got the Guardian to below half health, it charged up and slammed on the ground. This broke us into the lower level of the room that the rest of the fight was about to take place. After regaining enough health, I decided to get in close and do one last attack. I noticed he dropped something, and it turned out to be the gauntlet that he was using to pull us in. I looked at the enchants and realized that I could put sharpness on it. This thing looked absolutely amazing. It attacked really slow, but it already had a base damage of 11 hearts. I knew that I needed to test it out on some enemies, so I started to pillar up. It was now time to go home and get ready to take on the final boss. The next step in our progression was to summon and kill the Void Worm. This would award us with everything that we would need to enter the Abyss dimension. I put Sharpness 5 on the gauntlet and it boosted the attack all the way up to 14 hearts. Once I had everything that I needed, I jumped back through the portal and it was time to kill the Void Worm. Before we got started with the boss fight, I wanted to try something out. I wanted to see if placing the gauntlet in our left hand would speed up our attacks. And it turns out it absolutely does. It already worked so well, and if I could find something with a really fast attack speed and put it in my right hand, we would be so powerful. It was time to summon the Void Worm. I had to put the larva inside this block and wait for it to mature. It didn't take long, and now I could summon it. In order to fight the boss, I had to throw the mysterious worm into the void. So that's what I did. All of a sudden, the worm shot up from below me. This thing looked absolutely incredible. It then dive-bombed and threw me up into the air. Between the worm and the Enderman, I knew this was going to be pretty difficult. It was then that I realized that my dragon was going to get attacked. A gang of Endermen started fighting my dragon, and I could tell it was taking tons of damage. I opened fire with my bow and got some pretty good hits. And after a few more shots, the worm split in two. The worm and the Enderman started doing tons of damage. I needed to get somewhere safe and quick. And after healing up, I was able to take the final shots with my bow. We had done it. We had finally killed all the bosses in the new end. Although at this point we had yet to find our elytra, I decided now was the time to begin our next journey. It was now day 90. I decided now would be the perfect time to jump into the Twilight Forest. I surrounded a puddle of water with roses and then threw in the diamond. I really didn't mean to, but I set my horse on fire. He looked pretty upset. I gave him some stylish diamond armor so he would feel a bit better. Now there was nothing left to do but go through the portal. I emerged from the portal and quickly placed down a waypoint. The way to progress through the Twilight Forest is to defeat a series of bosses one by one. Immediately, I could see the lair of the Naga, which was the first boss we needed to kill. I approached the maze and broke in. When I got to the middle, I was attacked by a bouncing snake head. I kept trying to time my punches for when it lunged at me, but it wasn't working out very well. I decided to try out the katana, but that too didn't really help either. Next, I tried my bow, and that worked a lot better. When it got close, I would use my katana, and when it got far away, I would use my bow. After a few more hits, I was able to kill it. We had successfully defeated the Naga. It ended up dropping its head as a trophy. That gave me the new idea to make a trophy room, but that was probably gonna have to wait for our next 100 days. It was then that I decided to finally make our new set of corundum armor. I gathered the void crystals and the corundum and made our first full set. My next goal was to copy my current armor enchants onto this new set, but I wasn't thinking, and I didn't realize I wouldn't have nearly enough levels to do that yet. We would need to save the enchants for later. I then tried on our new set of corundum armor. This stuff looked so cool, especially with the gravity glove. Now, even though it had better base stats, it couldn't compete with my current enchanted armor. I still wanted to test it out in the field, so I upgraded my backpack to diamond tier and then made my way through the portal. It was now officially day 91. We were coming close to the end of this episode. The next step in our progression through the Twilight Forest was to kill the Twilight Lich. I broke into his tower and started making my way up the stairs. This tower was pretty tall. It had a ton of spawners along the way that I had to destroy. It also had some pretty funny paintings that I wanted to decorate with. I killed a bunch of different mobs while making my way up the stairs. There were these flying enchanted books that I actually thought were really great. After making my way up a little further, I had arrived at the lair of the Twilight Lich. Since I wasn't wearing my enchanted armor, this thing did tons of damage. I decided to retreat down the stairs and do some research on how I was supposed to kill this thing. I went back home and enchanted my corundum boots. I only needed a few more levels before I could enchant my helmet. I then spent the rest of the night killing all the mobs that I could and getting levels. Now I had enough experience to enchant my helmet, and once I did, it was time to head back. Through my research, I realized that I would need a regular sword in order to reflect the shots from the Twilight Lich. So I ran back in with my primitive wooden swords and started fighting. Getting the timing right on reflecting the pearls was difficult, but it was then that I realized that I could make the clones shoot each other. The Lich's shields were now down. After taking care of some zombies, I was finally able to open up with some melee attacks. And with one final blow, the Lich was dead. It was already day 92 and we still had 6 more bosses to kill. I was really gonna need to pick up the pace if we wanted to get this completed by day 100. Our next target was the Minnow Shroom. It could be found in a maze contained in the Twilight Swamp. I went back home and posed with our new trophies. I wanted to make it easier to get around in the Twilight, so this time I brought my horse. We walked around for what seemed like forever through the forest. I kept checking the map, but at this point I didn't even know which of these icons I was looking for. Turns out to be this one. It was taking so long to find that I decided to take out my frustration on another Twilight Lich. I left my horse on the bottom floor and started making my way up the stairs. Now that I knew how to defeat this thing, this fight took no time at all. When I got back down to the main floor, I realized that my horse was gone. I was gonna need to make the rest of the journey on foot. After walking for what seemed like an eternity, I had finally found it. We are now at the entrance to the maze. When I walked in, I was immediately attacked by a man with a cow head. These guys stood absolutely no chance for my katana. There were tons of new enemies. All of them made me excited for the next 100 days where we would come back and put them in our all-new zoo. I continued killing enemies and making my way through the maze. I kept coming across these trap chests, which were great for harvesting TNT. I practiced my karate skills on as many cow heads as I could find. It took an entire day of killing mobs and searching through the maze, but I had finally found it. I found the lair of the Minnow Shroom. I broke my way in and began my attack. This thing would get some distance and then charge at me, but with my new gear, it barely did any damage. After a super easy fight, the mushroom was down. Next up was the Hydra, but it was already day 96. I was gonna need to speedrun this if we were gonna get it done before day 100. And after a long journey, I had finally found the fire swamp. I now needed to eat the food that I got from the mushroom in order to be protected from the weather. While I continued through the swamp, the boss bar for the Hydra popped up. So I have to break the fourth wall for a second. The Twilight Forest is not exactly optimized for the shaders that I was using. So this is the Hydra that I was supposed to be fighting, and this is the Hydra that I ended up getting. Anyway, it was time to take down the big dumb Hydra that was only a torso. Usually in this fight, you wait for the mouth to open, but it didn't have a head on my screen. To kill it, I would get some distance and then wait till I saw smoke. My gear at this point was almost strong enough just to stand in the fire. After enough shots with my powerful bow, we had finally killed the Hydra. I then grabbed the trophy and we kept on moving. Our award for killing the Hydra was a ghost dragon egg. The next boss to defeat was called the Night Phantom, and after a little more traveling through the forest, we reached the outskirts of the dark canopies. I then found the entrance to the labyrinth. In order to make my way in, I would need to put down a trophy. I jumped down and started attacking some enemies. I got lucky and realized that the boss room was right beside where we dropped down. I broke in and started the fight. There were so many knights, but at this point I was way too strong for them. They stood absolutely no chance. In the chest, I found the Phantom chestplate and the Phantom helmet. There was now only 3 more bosses for us to fight, and the next was the Urgast. Before leaving, I tried on the new gear, and honestly, I looked pretty dumb. Luckily, already we were really close to where the Urgast is. I made my way through the dark canopies and I saw it in the distance. I broke my way into the bottom and I started moving through the rooms. I absolutely loved the style of this place. Look at how cool these doors are. In the next room, I was attacked by our first enemies. They were really cool, but they didn't put up much of a fight. It was in the next room that I realized we would need to complete a jumping puzzle to make our way up the tower. I needed to find the correct levers that would emit these red blocks that I could walk across. After guessing correctly a few times, I was nearing the top of the tower. I killed myself a tiny ghast and made my way up to the next floor. The next puzzle was a maze, and it contained some pretty good loot. But honestly, at this point, it was day 97, and I needed to start going quick. After killing an entire group of blazes that set me on fire more times than I could count, I was finally outside of the tower. I started building my way towards the middle. I pillared my way up until I was on more of a central platform. It was now day 98 and I was getting really worried that we weren't going to complete the Twilight by day 100. So I decided to cut my losses and pillar my way up all the way to the top. It was then that our battle began with the Urgast. I found these redstone contraptions that looked important, but at this point I had no idea what to do with them. After taking a few shots with my bow, I realized that the Urgast was able to regenerate its health. There was definitely something I needed to do here. I figured out that I needed to wait until all these little ghasts would spawn in and then I could kill them. Killing them would charge up this block that when I press a button, it would pull in the Urgast so we could get tons of melee attacks. I continued dodging all the tiers, and when it came close, I would press the button and start attacking. Finally, it came close enough, and for the last time, I pushed the button. We had officially defeated the Urgast. We now only had one more full day to finish the Twilight Forest. All that was left now was the Alpha Yeti and the Snow Queen. I began making my way down the tower. We were now officially in a race against time before day 100. I ran through the forest as fast as I could. It was then that I came across the outskirts of a snow biome. I noticed the entrance to the Alpha Yeti cave, and I made my way in. These things looked so goofy, I couldn't wait to throw them in the zoo. It was then that the Alpha Yeti spawned in. I charged in as fast as I could and got the first strike. This thing looked absolutely ridiculous, and it barely did any damage to me. It only took a few more swings, and the Yeti was officially dead. I spent some time killing the smaller yetis and collecting their fur. Once I was satisfied, I made my way out of the cave and towards the Rainbow Castle. I pillared my way up the glacial walls, and I realized that I had found the castle. I made my way inside and started killing some of the Ice Queen's minions. I had to jump from one pillar to another in order to progress up the tower. There were tons of floors, and each of them were completely filled with these evil snowflake things. There were also these mini specters that had enchanted swords. I opened up a chest and found the ender bow. It was now day 99, so I needed to get going quick. It was then that I broke into the lair of the Snow Queen. She started flying above me and trying to drop icicles on my head. She then summoned these icicles to keep me distracted. In order to attack her, I needed to jump up and get some critical hits. It was then that she charged up and dive-bombed me, breaking the floor beneath me. It was then that I was able to get some really good swings with my katana. After fighting off her minions, she dive-bombed again. I was able to get tons of hits every time she did that. Her next dive bomb was really successful, and it made me fall through the ground. At this point, the floor in our arena was almost completely destroyed, so I used some of my blocks to make it more of a fair fight. She got too close to us one last time, and I was able to get our final blow. We had done it. The Snow Queen was finally dead. We had officially completed all of the main quests in the progression through the Twilight Forest. There was now one last piece of bonus content for us to do. I started breaking my way down the tower and made my way towards something amazing. It was almost the end, and I just had to see this place before it was over. It took some traveling, but we had finally made our way towards the floating island. It took so many blocks to pillar my way up, but finally I was there. We had made it to Giant Island. The entire place was filled with giant Krillos. It did feel a little weird fighting things that looked so much like me, but at the end of the day, you gotta do what you gotta do. They ended up dropping these massive picks and massive swords. I mean, just look at how ridiculous this is. It's so awesome. And that was it. We had done it. We had survived 100 days together. I had so much fun making this episode. I need to say a huge thank you to everybody who stuck with me through my first YouTube video. If you're ever looking for a way to support the channel, you can always like the video and hit subscribe. But the best way will always be heading to Minefaces.com and picking yourself up your real-world skin. I'm so excited to launch this channel, and I can't wait for you guys to see the next episode in this series. Thanks, everyone.